sharing insights and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Right along here with Ransom Godwin every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight, many Ice Age conversations rolling you through the mind experiment that we call reality that is being bent, twisted to something that we just don't understand. As we say almost every week, I can't believe everything that happened this week. I mean, really, the amount of change that is going on. There is some, warning from Washington with all the craziness going on there. Set that aside. It's not really a political. But I do want to point one thing out. Matt Gaetz, the one who got McCarthy removed, he had this tirade of an interview earlier, and he starts going into the BRICS. It's 6 new countries, including, OPEC nations and monarchs and, G20 nation joining. And then he goes in, if we're going to lose the dollar, I'm going to be judged in history on that. Like, he said something so incredibly important, it made my hair stand on end when he said that. It's like they already know right now. So any toilet paper you buy is 3 times more expensive. That was the best performing asset in Germany as they start to collapse. Back to the Stone Age. Can you believe it? You should have held it in the COVID. Ransom, glad you're joining me. Things to dip into the bizarre. Well, I thought I included Ransom in there. Ransom, hang loose. If I didn't get you on, I thought I included you in on the call.
I'm here. It sounds like your mic keeps cutting out. Welcome. No, I'm not sure. I was checking the broadcast because I heard some interruptions in your mic when you were talking, and I didn't know if that was just on my end or what was going on.
Oh, thank you for letting me know. Again, I got one of these nasty little Microsoft updates. And
you're right. So this should sound better right here. Hi, communicated. Hi.
Boom. Yeah, that sounds sweet.
What I don't like is you get forced on these updates, and then once you do, it reverts and defaults things back to their original settings, Skype being one of them, every time a reset comes through. And also, banks now, you always have to get the code by the phone. So I just see a lot of things. They're trying to figure out who's still alive after this to use the phone to get into their accounts. I don't know. I interrupted you, man. Go ahead. My bad.
No, I was just tripping on that. In my opinion, I've been kind of tripping on the same thing. So I've been looking at the little games that they're playing back and forth in the government right now. And either A, they really up the script of drama so that people would pay attention to only the little dramas going around Washington, D.C., or B, they really are trying to set up the American public for a civil war by using these. I mean, I don't mean like Hollywood, but they are actors in the way that they push agendas, opinions, and different things to get people riled up to follow one of those concepts or the other, whichever one, that they heard in all of it. But, it could be a C, which I doubt, but it could be that some actual patriots or people that have felt guilty about selling out the U.S. is basically what's been going on Capitol Hill for some time, are actually trying to throw a wrench in the gears and stop it from happening. They keep arguing back and forth about whether or not we would like a government shutdown. I think that most people would get a great wake-up call at least those that don't depend on the government, that their lives would kind of continue unchecked there for a while everyone else would be panicking about failing because the government's failing. They forget we used to live in a country where the government didn't have their hand in every single thing that you did. So at one time in the government, people were living out there where they lived at their house. They took care of their food. They took care of any kind of utility needs that they had. They took care of it themselves. And they still found time to, have social lives and have a presence in their local religious center. They did all these things while working full time and having lots and lots of children. I don't know if time was moving slower back then, or it's just that there's a 1,000% increase in fake reality distraction nowadays. But I hope that really some people are being genuine and trying to throw the wrench in this machine that we call the swamp of DC. Because they obviously have not been doing anything in the American people's favor for some time. You can go ahead and pick your team and, put on your jersey, because think about this. And I thought it was really dumb at the time. And I don't know whether or not, people just get caught up in the tribalism and I know that that's a reality. But at the same time, I had this weird little theory that the people that were, behind the Trump campaign, like them or not, went around with the WWE or wrestling type business model. And they did a lot of research on how to gather big crowds of people and hook them in with the tribalism. Now, this exact thing they used in the 2016, the kind of MAGA wave. Now, I have no problem with the idea of making America great at any time. Again tomorrow, again the next day. That's great. No problem with that. What I had a problem with is what I thought wasn't a good idea. Not that there was anything nefarious behind it, but I just didn't think it was a good idea for half of the public to start wearing a type of uniform. In this case, it was, American flags and MAGA hats, and it allowed the media and the establishment to say, look, there's them. And then there's us and there's them. And that's really when they started pushing this division and making it a constant thing, ticking at and pecking at the mind of each American, this divide down the middle of seemingly different ideas. But in the backdrop, they all vote for the same programs. They're all saying yes to giving, our money away to proxy war somewhere else in the world that really has nothing to do with us. Meanwhile, there's no money left for veterans. There's no money left for homeless people. There's no money left to, actually exercise the law and protect the rights of the individuals in the U.S. And that would include, protecting them against invasion. But that's not what's going on. So it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, they're playing this game. So I hope that these are legit patriots, if that's what indeed is going on, and they throw a wrench in this spiral of the U.S. into a crashing entity, a husk of what it once was. Now, of course, there's been a lot of grievances over the history of the U.S. People bring up slavery a lot. They always leave out the fact that we were the second country in the world's history to outlaw it. So I guess, we came in second to the British. But they forget that a lot of firsts happen over here. The whole changeover of the mentality to treat human beings as, civil and civilians, and to have a melting pot of different people and different ideas together, that's right here. And that scares the elite, because it showed that human beings, when given a chance, will co-opt and work together and have a sense of nationalism and pride in their community, no matter what color they are. So what they had to do is drive that separation tool back down in there again and start spreading these ideas that we're the bad guys, and therefore you should disregard anything that was came with the founding fathers, because they were associated to having slaves at that time, like a lot of people around the world. But they leave out the fact that these were really, really educated people. So when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, they didn't accidentally say all men were created. They could have very easily, specifically said which men they thought were created equal, but they didn't do that. They obviously wrote that in a way in which the topic would come up later because it needed to be addressed at the time. You can't found a nation that has slavery and also say that all men are created equal with inalienable rights given to them by their creator. So they knew that they would have to address this issue when they wrote the document, and the document being something that the elite are terrified of and hate because it's the idea that you are by yourself an important entity in the world because you were created by your creator and you're born and you exist, and therefore you can protect yourself, and therefore you can have an opinion, and therefore you can have your pursuit of happiness. And this is what they have tried to erase, strip away, and make people forget, this idea that's new in the world. And think about that, the long history of human beings. This is the first time we have a document that anybody from anywhere can read and understand that saying in there means them. No matter what they look like, no matter what their religious belief is, no matter what their skin tone is or their country of origin, if they came here and they assimilated into our system, they know that document is talking about them when it says all men. And, I hate the new language where it seems like that's leaving the females out. And of course it's not, because writers always have used the term men and mankind to represent the entire human race. So now we're at this point where they're throwing all this stuff, and, it scares me because even if it's a legit movement going on, the powers that be will use it for what they've been wanting to do for a long time, which is create a civil war in the United States. And they have to do this to complete their one world order or their great reset. They can't do it without doing one thing that Americans have that no one else has in the world, and a document that backs up the concept, and that's the right to defend yourself and the right to have free speech and pursue your happiness. That terrifies them. They hate it. They have to destroy it. And they know they can't do it with an outside force, just like many a general known that they couldn't do that to the United States. We have to do it to ourselves. We have to do it internally. So if we let these actors, these clowns on Capitol Hill, divide people and, create division that's really at the forefront of mankind's thought in America, then they have achieved their goal. And that is divide and conquer. And that's what they've been doing. And they've been pushing that so hard. And it's kind of frothing up to the top. But I have faith that just like every time they try to pull this, there's a core of Americans that just don't buy it. We're okay with other Americans. We're okay with the world. We want to trade with them. We want to have freedom. We want to spread the idea of freedom. And, those two ideas, the Great Reset and our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, they just don't mix, do they? They are like oil and vinegar. No matter how many times you try to shake it up, they're going to separate into two different sides, and they know that. The problem is that they're convincing people to give up their own rights, and there are many people that are joining the wrong side of ideas simply because they just don't understand. And I've seen numerous articles talking about, the majority of Americans nowadays that are under 50 don't even understand the Constitution. They don't know the rights that are in there. And, if you don't know your own rights, how can you respect someone else's rights, right? Because once you know that you have the right to exist and you have the right to think, well, that allows you to give that same right, in your behavior to someone else, because you wouldn't want those rights stripped from you. So, of course, the people that believe in those rights would not want to strip them from other people. And that's where I think they're trying to derail the American people. And if they can't get it going culturally, they'll starve us until people are so upset and so irritated that, it'll just be one match that's struck that will set the whole thing on fire. And I think that's what they're going for. And you see that in the inflation. I just watched a YouTube video earlier where a guy was walking around Costco comparing prices of a video he did just 1 year ago. And he was saying, I don't think that if something costs this much and then it's double the price in 1 year, that's 17% inflation. That's more like 75 to 100% inflation.
Yeah, I would agree. And, just for everybody out there, as a statement on the record, I will not put my energy into that division and getting out to hurt other people. That's just not part of me at all. And I think that's the same for almost every single human being out here. They're not going to want to get involved in the fray and start it. There's a huge difference of people trying to get you riled up, to get you out to the street, to bring whatever with you, to show it, and then, have later on somebody knock at your door and come with a warrant. Somebody coming up directly to your house and start banging the door in and kicking the windows in to try to get into your place, that's quite a very, very, very different thing. But I will not get drawn into this whole media meme with Clown Hill, if for a better term, pushing people in to start fighting each other for no reason. That the human just mechanism is stability. You have to be forced into that fighting. And if we all say no, we're not going to use our energy for that. We're going to use our energy to point at the true villain, and we're going to use our energy to rebuild our society. And we're going to use that energy to make not only this country, but the world great again, away from parasite control. That's where it needs to go to. I refuse to put my energy into any civil splitting of humanity. We're all made in the image of God. We are from the Creator. I am. I'm a part of creation. I'm a part of the Creator. Everybody is part of that same creation and part of that same Creator. So to try to get us to think that we are nothing more than an expression of creation, that somehow we're supposed to divide that based on an ideology, that's insanity, truly insanity. Now, a direct threat of, your safety. I mean, if you come up to my house and you're going to come in the door, you're going to have a big problem. But if you're going to try to, like I say, get me to a street somewhere to protest this or, look at those people over there, whatever, not going to do it. That is a complete waste of my time. And that's a complete waste of time in everybody's time. We got better things to do with our time, like growing your food, setting up your communities, getting your communities ready for these changes. We're going to be rocking through a change here pretty quick. It's not like things are in motion that just can't be stopped. You look at a big, heavy train that's, a mile long, full of coal. That thing's not going to stop for miles, plural. Even if they hit the brakes full on and lock every carriage up, that's going to skid for a bit. And they usually don't ever do that because it'll get so hot that, there'll be some serious damage. It'll take them quite a long time. So, they kind of, in an emergency, half the cars are going to brake on, but they're going to try to, heavy brake on the rest. But still, you're talking miles to stop that train. This is the same exact thing. Same exact thing. You hit a really good point there about rolling the clock back or the years back, the calendar back a bit. We were self-sufficient. Now, for those of you that don't know, 40% of everything eaten in an American home in World War II, I'm talking everything, was in the household. And you might say, yeah, well, they had a bunch of farms back then thing. No, I'm talking about the full Victory Garden program. We're talking in cities. They were still able to produce 40% in a city by using the disused land, the area between roads, people's homes, etc. And that was on the home level at 40% ability to sustain yourself. Because in a video earlier today that I did, there was somebody who put a tweet out that showed $90 worth of their groceries. And they were appalled, just jaw dropped, gobsmacked, like talking 70% inflation. But I looked at what they had there. They had a handful of vegetables, and I'm like, most of those you could grow if you had a small balcony. You could grow that. Tomato plants, some celery. I think they had some shallot onions, and even little tiny cucumbers. I mean, you have dwarf varieties of cucumber you can grow on a windowsill. When I was just looking there going, no way, you can grow a lot of that, yet the training to do that, I don't fault that person for complaining at the prices of the groceries or fault them at all for not having the training to be able to grow food, because that just was completely wiped out after World War II, moving into the 1950s and 60s. They wanted to get you completely back on that system. And I know we had this conversation before. And after World War II, of the total consumption of all meats, including farmers and not just neighborhoods, it was around 60% of everything locally was completely self-sufficient. The only thing they really needed were like refined motor fuels, steel, and this types of things that they couldn't make in their own local neighborhoods. Outside of that, everything that was consumed in the human body in terms of foodstuffs all came within like a 50-mile radius, and it was very self-sufficient during that time. I can't say 100 because I don't have that exact fact, but I know I can guarantee 60. Then they, after World War II, like, oh, life is so easy. We're going to go to the Green Revolution, and we're going to mechanize everything, and we're going to set up these supermarkets. You don't have to grow your stuff anymore. Why would you waste your time? It's so easy. It's so fresh. It's so cheap. And they got us away from that. So I was actually in Costco and Sam's Club today as well. I went to both because, my supplies were getting a little low, and I thought, with all the craziness going on, I probably wanted to go out to the store. Plus, I had a chance to spend the afternoon with my dad, which is super cool. So he went shopping with me, and we ended up talking about all things the oil embargo, because we went by Costco for a second, and it kind of scared me a minute because there were like 7 or 8 cars in each pump. And I go, oh, no, what is that? How many cars? Look how many cars are waiting. And he goes, oh, it's like that all the time. Because I hardly ever go there, like a once in a seriously blue moon. And I was like, they wait 6 or 7 cars deep to save like 30 cents on a gallon. And he's like, oh, it's like that every day. So we started talking about the oil embargo from the 1970s because I was a little too young. I remember sitting in the car with my mom because my mom would be the one to go get fuel when my dad was at work. We always needed to make sure that my dad had fuel to get to work the next day. So I don't care how long it took. I remember sitting in that car forever to get fuel. So I had a chance to talk to my dad, and I was like, all right, break it down for me. Like, really, the fuel embargo, and the whole story stemmed from a video I'd done today too. That same tweet about the person complaining of $90 worth of groceries when they could have produced half of what they bought for cents or pennies. And also they were complaining about, oh, this chicken's so expensive. Oh, this meat is so expensive. I'm like, well, do you know your local farmer? Like, do you go anywhere where there's a local farm? Like, do you know any of that stuff? Or do you just exclusively shop downtown somewhere? So, getting into the strategic petroleum reserves in America right now, for anybody out there, as a fact, there's only 17 days of strategic petroleum reserves available for Americans. Ransom, can I get a sound check?
Sound good to me, man.
Okay, great. I was looking at my computer and it looks empty there. But 17 days worth of petroleum reserves. And I was telling my dad this, and he's like, oh, wow. Sounds like if they turn it off or if something happens, then we're not going to have any petrol. And that's how the whole conversation started about the oil embargo in the 70s. So I was asking him about it. And he's like, yeah, it wasn't like every station had cars snaking around the block. And it depended on what time you went, if you went super early or super late, just before they closed. And he was very clean that, yes, there were some places in cities where the lines just wrapped and wrapped and wrapped around the blocks, people waiting. And they didn't idle their cars. They restarted them every single time to save the petrol, because there was no, like, each time a car moved, you started your car and you burned the starter and you moved up one position, right? Nobody was idling anything. But what was so funny, because I was like, he was telling me about the gas wars where, there'd be 2 petrol stations across the street from each other. And some places would offer it for like 35 cents. And then the other place across the street would offer it for like 32 cents per gallon in the United States in the 1970s. But he's like, during the oil embargo, the prices jumped astronomically. So I said, well, what was astronomical? I mean, how much was it? And he goes, about $1.20 from 35 cents to $1.20. Maybe some expensive places will call it $1.50. And he looks at the signs, and we drove by a couple petrol stations as we were going about our day, and it was like $3.25 here in East Tennessee right now for just regular whatever junk they're putting in it now, the ethanol E85. Anyway, it was $3.25 for the lowest price petrol in the stations. And he looks at me, starts grinning. He goes, "Look at that price. Even when we had the exceptional, unbelievable price rises that freaked everybody out during the oil embargo, that was still a discount bargain price to what we're paying today." And that really kind of it framed it really well for me that, what we're heading into here with petroleum reserves going down to 17 days worth of stock. Before it was 2 years. You have to realize that before Biden comes into office, and I don't want to make it political, but it became political. We had 2 years worth of petroleum reserves through the pipelines, re-injected wells, because a lot of the wells that had been drained, they re-injected oil down in there knowing it was an encased area. So they stored not only above ground in what you consider tanks, but in the pipe itself. And then also they re-injected wells to fill it up where they knew that there was no cracking in the well itself. So it was just a refill, and then they could start the pumps again and pull it back out if needed. Now, we had approximately 2 years of that around the United States. Now, we are down to 17 days. That is absolute insanity. Because as we look out at the world, and, the Matt Getz, I'll come back to this article here. I talked about that in the beginning of the show. So he spoke to reporters after removing McCarthy from office. And that's its own thing, and I don't want to talk about that. Maybe Ransom will, but I'm not going to. But he was surrounded by those reporters, and he goes and he says, "This makes me sick to my stomach. This validates all of the things that we're seeing across the media about the majority of the world wanting to de-dollarize." And he goes into this 1 minute and 50-second speech of just napalming everything out there in its path. Because the U.S. dollar is collapsing and will be rejected by nations around the world as a means of trade. And he gets into it and says, the de-dollarization, if we're going to lose the dollar. And for me, I'm like, what does he know if he's already saying if we're going to lose the dollar? It was more like if you changed that one word, when we're going to lose the dollar, because he was so clean talking about all these other nations, including OPEC nations, which winds back to the oil embargo part, that he is very clean and clear that he understands monarchies and OPEC nations now are in the BRICS and the Belt and Road Initiative and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And they will settle with gold or any kind of commodity that can be traded amongst nations. Now, he just goes on a tirade about this, but, if you got a high-level official that all eyes are on this person now, this is the spotlight figure in American politics. He's talking about de-dollarization now. And I'm just curious, when it starts to make it through the mainstream American psyche, that our dollar is going to be worth less and less and less. Because that term hyperinflation that you hear, it is a psychological triggering of extreme spending the second you get your money, because it's going to devalue. So example, Argentina, I covered this yesterday in my video on ADAPT 2030. The Argentinian peso currently is devaluing at 12% per month. So that means if you get paid on the first and you kind of hold your money and you only spend a little bit on the first to buy food, and maybe on the second you get some gas, and on the third you buy some fertilizer, and then on the fourth you get some dog food, and then on the fifth you get some clothes for the family, and on the sixth you go out for dinner. All right, so when you wind up 2 weeks later, you've lost 6% of your purchasing power. Now, if you wait a full 30 days, everything's going to be 12% more expensive for you. Now, the awareness is in Argentina, so the same day that they get it, everything flows into the economy in a single day. And then for the rest of the month, there's nothing, zero. I mean, there is some minimal spending, but comparatively, that's not an averaged or balanced spending in any way, shape, or form. It's rocked down to zero. Everybody spends the same day they get, and depending on the payday, so here in America, mostly it's the 1st and the 15th. But I know veterans getting benefits, and those on EBT programs, et cetera, they only get once a month. So can you imagine everybody across America understanding that America is going into, like you're saying, 70% inflation? I would agree. I know it's a minimum 20%. 70% on the year. So what does that break down to per month? 8%? Well, that would be in the 90%. What? It's 6% per month. So you have to realize that every time you hold your money, it's going to lose 6%. So it's going to cost you 6% more to buy everything, as you entailed with the person comparing the supermarket prices. The hyperinflation thing is going to be a trigger of psychology in the mind where the money doesn't devalue because of government action, although it is indirectly. It's the awareness of the populace that each day they wait, or each hour, or each week they wait, that they're not going to be able to buy as much. So everybody's going to get on the same bandwagon that they need to spend everything immediately as quickly as they get it. Now this becomes a nasty reinforcing feedback loop. At what point does it reach America? I don't know. It seems like it's coming really fast. And it only takes really that first or second time of everybody spending on a day, and then the mechanism, as you understand, the stable economy is broken. And at that point, that's when you start to see these chapters of hyperinflation. I've done a ton of study on this, and I'll just say from what I've read and what I've written down and done videos on and spoken with others, it's about 5 months. 5 months. So if you're going to actuate and have an exit plan for your gold or silver or whatever you have, jewelry, anything, house, it's going to hyperinflate during that time. Currency will be revalued at least once or twice during that time. You're going to want to hit it on the first currency revaluation, and 5 months is pretty much what you get out of it. So if you think you're going to be able to continually rise prices for several years into the hyperinflation and buy a farm for an old penny, that ain't happening. So you're going to have to time it sort of correctly. When you see the hyperinflation, it's going to start hitting the news. You're going to see tons of lines outside the stores on those paydays. Once you see that, you need to start getting your affairs in order very quickly. 5 months is the maximum roll most times on a hyperinflative event. So anyway, I hope that explained a little bit about your supermarket pricing, and that person did a really good job going back in with the video to show pre and now current prices. I mean, we saw a thing today. So usually we'll buy the Colombian coffee, and it comes in like a 2-pound tin. Before, it used to be, when I first got back to America during the COVID time back in like 2020, mid 2020, that thing was like $8.50. Today it's $14.50. So that's just coffee, but that's just one thing. But everything in the store has risen. And also 3-liter bottles of olive oil today, extra virgin olive oil, it comes in a set of 2. Now, when we used to go buy it before, it was around 18 to 20 bucks, maybe even 16 if I can remember it being that low, 15 to 16. And then it kept going up. And every time we'd go over to Costco, it'd go up again. It'd be 18 and then 20 and then 23 and then 26. Today, $44. I blew my mind. I was like, I'm not paying that much money for extra virgin olive oil. $44 for 6 liters, which is like a gallon and a half. Shocked me, the price. I should have taken a picture of it, but I was just thinking, it kept going up every time, So anyway, man, I'm just rambling. Ransom, jump back in.
Yeah, it seems to be all set up where, they have a plethora of excuses why food is about to go up. And, we've been talking about this just about for 2 years straight. And I'm just looking like the companies are freaking out also because, there's new trends of people, they're worried that they're taking too many pharmaceutical drugs and they're not going to be spending as much money on the food that's out there. And then, I saw this article from Natural News, kind of gets to the meat of what's going on around the world, where it talks about, will World War III be the excuse for extreme food rationing across America? And I was just thinking, that might be one of them. And it seems like that they're headed full steam for this and that they have to have this. The whole reorganization of the world depends on them changing some, elements of the world right now. We spoke a little bit about that before as far as the American end of that, but we're not the only ones. There are different countries around the world that if left alone, they could be completely self-sufficient, and they know that. So you have to get in there with your hooks in every civilization around the world. And we've talked a lot about how there's a reorganization of investment that's kind of going around the equatorial regions of the planet. And then you see articles like this, which it's a good article, and it goes through World War I and World War II, and how hunger was a major problem through those unfortunate events. But they're trying to set up this event again, and just think about all of the chicanery that's going on, the shenanigans in Washington, D.C. Wouldn't it be great for them if any number of things happened where they could say, well, it wasn't our fault. We tried. We tried to keep it together, but, we just couldn't do it. It was because of them. It was because of them. What do we got? Well, let's make up, some homegrown terrorism where there is none. We'll, if the dollar busts, that would be a great one for the politicians. Because, they'll be like, oh, it's not our fault. And then one side will be blaming the debt and the other side will be blaming that they shut down the government so many times and they wouldn't let their socialistic programs go through. So there'll be a bunch of finger pointing. And what better way to get out of that than historically where you reset financial systems by having a world war? My son asked me about that movie Schindler's List. And I said, yeah, that's a pretty trippy movie from the 90s about the Holocaust and what was going on in Poland, to be there. And, if you watch that movie and listen and pay attention to the economic points in the movie, and you'll see like that movie explains everything about how things get reorganized from start to finish. So we're using the Hebrew there as an example, unfortunately, at that time. But they did have a lot of wealth, and they tried to hide it. They tried to hide it by putting it in objects that they had on them. But the point in which that they started doing this was way past the point where they should have been planning ahead. Unfortunately, it was they planned a little too late. So a lot of them were trying to wear it. And they ended up wearing it and concentrating it all together in the ghetto, where it got taken away from them later. And that's why the groups that were, destabilizing the area were forcing them out of their homes so they would get all their valuables and take it to a centralized location where they could be robbed en masse. However, those people also took that wealth and it got converted. And by the end of the war, it supposedly wasn't in the hands of any of the people that concentrated that wealth. It disappeared all over the world, namely the United States, Britain, Russia, etc. A bunch of people got a piece out of the pie, and none of that really went back to the individuals or the individual families that it was stolen from, obviously. But they put it into world programs, and that's what they always do. So if you don't think that the world powers are willing to collapse the society, strip its wealth, and convert it to a new kind of wealth so that they can use it for their own programs, you have not studied history at all. They absolutely do that. And I see all signs of them doing that now. It's just a more technocratic, technological kind of implementing of World War II. It's not going to be exactly like that. They're not going to go door to door and try to do that because the world won't let them. They already played that card. They already did that. They already, did the theater of war on the whole world once. But all of those people are now dead or dying. So this is the perfect time to do it again, because they know that people are uneducated about historical events, where some of the philosophies like Marxism, socialism, and et cetera came from. They're unaware of the plurality of power that the elite have used for some time, meaning that there always has to be an enemy on one side or the other. Like the youth, if you ask any person under 30, I bet most of them don't know that the United States set up Stalin, gave him money, gave him aid. I bet they don't know that we also did the same for Mao in China. So these are the banks and the world powers, doing these proxy wars until they have what they want. So it doesn't matter how they get it. They can starve the people, which is a classic form of weapon that they've used in every war that I can think of. Even the war between the Apache Geronimo and the U.S. government was ended not because of brute force, but because they stopped all the lines of food. They basically starved the Apache out until they had to give up. Otherwise, they would die of starvation. And, there's millions and millions of people that died in, you name which war. You can pick the Iraq War from 1991 till 2001 and into 2010, and where probably about 2 million people died of starvation and secondary causes due to the destabilization of the war. And now we fast forward to now, and we had that war, right? And we went in there and we took all our contractors and we put American business in there and we set up all kinds of stuff. And now by the end of this year, Iraq will be completely de-dollared. In other words, all transactions, that are done in the area of this place that we destabilized and then propped up with our own puppet government is now going to be doing business against the United States. So all those millions of dollars we put into it, not only from destroying it, but trying to rebuild infrastructure, is now going to be used to make money in another currency, competing with the U.S. dollar. And if you look around from country to country, this is increasing. So the United States and the petrodollar is becoming outnumbered. This seems to be an exponential rate. That's a factual thing, that it will happen. And if you've ever listened to people like Ron Paul and other financial experts, they've told us that the fiat currency will pop eventually. And it seems like right now it'll be the perfect scapegoat to not only enter into World War III, but explain away how and why the standard of living in the Western world has dropped to a dramatic low. Mr. DuByne, are you there?
No, I am here. My dog just jumped up on the counter and pulled one of the chickens that I had gotten down. It's the second time she did that tonight. So I heard the thunk out in the kitchen right when you were finishing up talking about the Iraq. As that is. So getting what you deserved. And for those of you in America, I'm not anti-American. It's just that was a Charlie Foxtrot going up in there and taking over that country because Gaddafi wanted to move over to, or I'm sorry, that was Libya. Hussein wanted to move over to gold-backed currency just like Gaddafi did. Now, at that point, the American military was super, super strong, and we just overused that. And anytime you want to call him a dictator, okay, that's what we know in the news. An American was fed as a dictator. Those people were ruled with an iron fist because they had to try to control the tribalism. But then they wanted to do good things with that money and get bring their countries up. Literacy, cleanliness, water programs, hygiene, they cared about their people. And the way that we portray them in the media is something completely different than what they were trying to accomplish with their nations by breaking free from this American homogeneity, using the U.S. dollar and be beholden to it and having it as the only thing. They wanted to set up gold systems for payment back then. That's why we went in there. It wasn't about the invasion. It was about stopping a gold-backed currency from forming in the Middle East. Pure and simple. That's all it was about. And all the other narratives spun in there about the oil and this, that, and the other. You can look back in World War II. Yeah, Hitler was given the green light to run into countries. And then suddenly we got to fight him now. That was the same thing. Jeez, it's just copy and paste, repeat and rinse. So on the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast channel, reading through the comment box here. And Sassafras, I'll get to your bit about silver. But talking about Hungary, 1946, inflation was only 44%. And then this is 567 by 890X, giving this comment out here. And then, so at the end of July 1946, inflation rate was 41.9 quadrillion %, causing prices to double every 15.6 hours. Can you think about that for a second? Prices doubled every 15 hours. Like, can you imagine? You would have to be paid by the hour, literally, maybe hourly payment. I work for an hour. You got to give me the money so I can go buy bread for my family, and then I'll be back. Because at the end of the day, you would have lost 50%. Imagine working a 12-hour day for somebody, working hard. You're out in the farm fields, you're doing a factory job, whatever, and you're in there for 12 hours. But by the time you get out of that to go buy anything, whatever your wages were only bought you 50% of what you went in the morning. That's insane. That's really crazy. And Sassafras wanted to come over to the U.S. debt clock because I actually did this on a video just a couple days ago. So if everybody wants to go out to usdebtclock.org, it's a great one. And also there were some anomalies in the usdebtclock.org because when I'd done the video in the morning, it was still at 33.1 trillion. But by the afternoon, somebody sent me a couple screen grabs that said, hey, it jumped to 33.4 trillion in an afternoon. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's weird. I just pulled this screen grab this morning. But anyway, if you go to the right side, remember there was the dollar to silver ratio that was $0 per ounce. Well, they've added a couple new columns there to explain it. The dollar availability in the world is shrinking. So the dollar supply is now going negative. So when you pull money out of circulation and take it in negative, that explains why there was $0 per ounce on the gold to dollar ratio and $0 per ounce on the dollar to silver ratio. I did a full video about that 3 months ago, maybe. But now they've revamped it. Now they actually have the dollar to silver ratio over a 5-year average and then a dollar to silver ratio on a 10-year average. So if you're listening and you can't go to usdebtclock.org, if things were to stick currently with the amount of debt we have, with the amount of silver we have here in America, and worldwide as well, Mexican production has just dropped off a cliff. So we kind of, pretty much have as much silver as we're going to get. There'll be some trickle in for new supplies, but without all the new usage in the green economy and, the military applications for it, it's just, there's not going to be more silver. So if you're going to look at the 5-year average, it's $1,558 per ounce. And if you're looking at the 10-year average, obviously it wasn't as bad 10 years ago. So we're looking at $1,120 per ounce. Now, the thing is, if you do the dollar to gold ratio on a 5-year average, it's only $12,596, which is far, 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 far less than, because silver's $2,000 per ounce today. So that's a 6x increase. But if you look at the silver ratio, if it really reached parity with the debt around the world to the amount of silver ounces around the world and it became monetary again or even used in industrial applications as a value itself, because you're going to have to buy it at the rate of monetary metals. I don't care if you need it for wires in a computer. Don't care. You're going to be buying at monetary value. People think it's $25 an ounce now. Well, if you're actually going to do the ratio of that of all the U.S. national debt squeezed into the amounts of ounces of silver that we have here, you're looking at $1,500 per ounce. So at $25 up to $1,500, that's a far greater exponent. What's that, 80x compared to $12,000 on the gold ratio, which is just a 6x. Now, also, for those of you out here who can't see the usdebtclock.org, they've added an entirely new column in here. The G7 GDP to gold ratio and the BRICS GDP to gold ratio. So those are two new different metrics that are, something to take a look at. Because the G7 GDP is $72,000 per ounce on that, and the BRICS GDP ratio is 134,000. So obviously there's less control. There's less countries, but there's such wealthy nations like Russia, China, Brazil. I mean, if you try to put that amount into the ounces on the debt of the nations, you're going to come up with a much higher number on that than you would if you have like all the G7 nations spread out. So whatever way you look at it, something's going to break free here. And the only thing holding down currently, the only thing holding the price where it is at $25 or $2,000, it's probably $1,970 today, $1,970 on the gold price. The only thing holding that down is the artificial markets on the paper contracts holding short. Now, Shanghai is just starting to break this. Now, Shanghai today, for those of you who didn't get the news, is offering a $140 more in Shanghai for the same 1 ounce of gold. So now we're starting to get multiple prices across the planet for gold. Now, what Shanghai is trying to do is, in the Shanghai Gold Exchange, is bring all the world's gold supply into China. Now, currently at $140, I guess if you have your own private aircraft and you can get a hold of a bunch of physical, you could roll it over there and, take some premium on that. If you had a 1,000-ounce bar, you could get, ask a premium for that on top of that and probably come up with $150,000 extra dollars away from what you paid for it over here in America. Great. Well, I was going there on a business trip anyway. I just made 150 grand on the trip. Great. Thanks, COMEX. I'll take delivery of that. But the eventuality, even within the next 2 to 3 weeks, the forecast pricing in Shanghai will be $250 over what the American prices or the British on the London Bullion Metals Exchange are going to be. Now, that is a forecast 3 weeks or under from today. So by the end of October, they're going to be offering $250 more per ounce on gold in Shanghai. Now, that is going to continue to increase month upon month. So I haven't seen any forecasts for the November price. They call it an arbitrage opportunity. Arbitrage, you buy it one place cheaper and then you sell it in another place a little more expensive. Like a lot of people were doing that with Bitcoin down in South Africa there for a while because, Bitcoins are going for 50% more down in South Africa. If you could get it down there to somebody that could get it on an exchange and then exit the position for you. But that was back during the Bitcoin time, 2018, 19, somewhere like that. But think about the gold arbitrage opportunities. What if it's $1,000 an ounce? And you take a 1,000-ounce gold bar, you just made $1 million in a single day by moving a piece of metal on an airplane to a different country. And you can do that all day long. Dude, round trip, I'm getting a private pilot. We're going to roll another 1,000-ounce gold bar down there. Boom, another $1 million. Can you imagine people arbitraging on $1,000 difference on the ounce of gold price and just taking physical delivery in either London or United States, or coming in and just buying stuff online, accumulating a bunch of it and then running it over to China, making that $1,000 per more on the ounce? Now, eventually, it's going to start trending way, way, way higher. So what if the COMEX tries to keep it at 3,000, but Shanghai offers 5,000? And you got a $3,000 arbitrage on that? Even me, I'm going to be like, all right, let's see what we can do about that. $120 today is, somebody might have a gold bar in their airplane or laying around that they might want to get rid of for some quick cash. But $1,000 arbitrage or a $3,000, what happens if they take it up to 10,000 and they just start making, offering their own currencies backed by a $10,000 ounce of gold? And we're over here in fake land, stuck at 2,000, hyperinflating away. And eventually something is going to break. And see, they're doing this on purpose. This is an actual ploy. This is a way to break the American dollar without firing a single shot. I could just keep offering more money over in China to buy your gold, and eventually all the flows of all the gold are going to head over to China or Russia or whatever. Maybe Brazil will also offer a huge arbitrage opportunity. Hell, it'll save me a lot of jet fuel on my plane getting down there with 1,000 ounces every trip. Think about that. A 2-hour trip to Brazil on an aircraft with 1,000 ounces of gold at $2,000 arbitrage, where the price of gold is double around the world outside of the American control of the COMEX and the British control at the LBMA, and everywhere else around the world's offering double the price of gold. Well, you know what? That gold's going to get siphoned out so fast, they're going to be everybody asking for physical delivery, and that is going to bring the house down. They're going to try to offer physical cash, but there's a lot of strong-arm players out there that are like, bro, I want my 1,000-ounce bar. Give it to me. Because as soon as I move that thing, I'm going to make $2 million or $3 million by taking a 2-hour aircraft trip down to another country. Everybody's going to be like, no. I'm not taking cash settlement, bro. Forget it. I'm not even going to take any new contracts with you. Forget it. We're done. I'll cash settle, but I'm going to buy everything I can off an online exchange. And you know what? After that, no new contracts will be issued. And that is the end, the absolute end of the U.S. dollar. If they cannot control the gold price, then what you understand is the U.S. dollar, the finance system, and England, or the Bank of England, they're both in the same boat, and the euro too. Like if you want to take down 3 major economies on the planet, just keep letting the gold price run up and offer more in a different nation to pull all the gold. But you got to make it juicy enough that everybody wants to get physical and move it out of the countries. You know, in the beginning, it's only going to be big players because I don't have a private jet. I mean, could you rent one? And what would the price be? Because you got to think about this in a real term. Like, let's say 10 people got together and the private jet costs 20 grand to rent to go down to Brazil. But then you also need the gold from somewhere. So you got other people that can, you know, by the time you run a jet down and a jet back, that'll be 20 grand for the trip on the airfare. On a private jet, no customs, you're in and you're out. But then what kind of gold could you take with you or silver to exit down there and come in and out of that? And would it be profitable? At some point, it's going to roll over into profit depending on, you have to do like a cost analysis, like how many ounces of gold do we get? How many ounces of silver do we need to get? What's this airline going to cost us? And who's going to be the buyer? You know, this is going to be a big business moving metals across the planet here, I assure you. And as the economies are collapsing and things start to, you know, devalue pre-hyperinflation, it's just going to incentivize people to move their metals across borders. It's going to be crazy here in a few minutes. Like, seriously, if you are not getting ready right now for some of these changes, you're going to be left in the soup and bread line, and I pity you. If you're stuck in the soup and bread line, they're going to make you do so many things. You're going to want to take your own life before you're going to want to do what they're going to make you do. That's where it's going. And, you know, there was a perfect thing with Schindler's List. Like, yeah, that movie was a mind blower. So anyway, we should be heading on break here in just a second. Sorry, I ramble sometimes when I get into my tangent. But Maud O'Dib culled 10 broilers and hauled 600 pounds.
Today, the demand for gold continues to flourish globally. History proves that fiat paper money is designed to go to zero through inflation, whereas gold has intrinsic value in which it maintains forever. Paper money is a debt instrument. Gold is an asset of wealth in its own right. It does not depend upon any governments, corporations, or individuals' promise to repay. ITM Trading has spent the last 27 plus years developing a team of expert researchers and analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn or currency collapse. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422. Or go to learn.itmtrading.com/MIAC and keep watching Mountain High Time and Mini Ice Age Conversations if you know what's good for
banks in America, which means you can't pay any of your bills until the 13th. That's the first day that'll allow you to click to set your payment. Now, for me, I have a house payment that does that same thing. So what about on my mortgage? What if you can't pay your mortgage on time? These are the little things that scare me a bit here too. So Ransom, take us out to the break, man.
I
can hear you in the
think there is a
background, but
break.
I don't know if we're on air or what's going on here.
Yeah, well, we're still broadcasting, so there just
Take us
wasn't
out
no
until the
break this
music
time.
starts.
I don't think the music's going to start. It's the break's over. Some kind of glitch.
You had something super special planned for the break tonight.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on at Rev Radio. The little mid-hour thing didn't play tonight, so I don't know. But you talked through it, so we're already in the next hour.
Yeah, everybody listening, you can take your own bathroom break when you need it. We had something going on at the Twilight Zone that we were going to run during the break because we thought it was so perfect for this day and age to run. And you know, the episode that the voice was pulled from, that we were going to overlay Rod Sterling's voice changed by a quarter octave. So it's not actually his voice. It's a quarter octave changed. So it's similar, but not exact. But anyway, the episode was in the it was early 1960s, like 59 or 1960. That episode ran. They gave all these warnings that Russian aircraft are coming over. And this was during the height of the scare of the nuclear thing. So everybody dug a bunch of bunkers in their neighborhoods. And this guy was the only one who had a bunker in his current neighborhood. But they gave the warning that the airplanes are flying, the bombers are coming over from Russia, they're going to nuke everything. So he got him and his family down into the bunker. But all of his neighbors got all together, and with like 15 or 20 of them were able to break through his bunker with a bunch of huge like timbers and crowbars, and the whole neighborhood working to break into the thing. And they finally broke in. And just as they were getting in to kill the guy and bring him out and rip off his food and steal everything from his family, another announcement came on and said, "Oh no, we made a mistake. That was just our own Air Force doing some practice runs. Sorry, my bad." But that was the same exact episode that we pulled the voice from to be able to bring you that content during the break. Spooky, yet fills the blanks in for what's happening today. Like that whole scare in the 1950s and 60s, weird. It's overlapping again.
I can play it for our video viewers, and we can come back after a short 3-minute pee break. We'll take our own break right here. Yeah, I don't know what happened. Some kind of glitch at the radio. They didn't play their mid-hour break there like they usually do. I was wondering because I never heard the music
Ransom.
coming.
Now Ransom used AI to create this ad here. So what we do is we try to take these different voices through history, and then we change them slightly, and we create an avatar that's not exactly the same, that looks similar to the person, but it's not the same person. So we're doing two different mechanisms here. So enjoy the next 3 minutes and see if you're listening and you can't see the audio, or I'm sorry, you can't see the video, but you can only hear the audio. Drop a comment in the comment box and see if it moved you, what kind of emotion you felt during the message, and if it reflects on today. But please remember, this script and the episode that it was taken from was from the late 1950s, early beginning of 1960, to put it into perspective. Well, now see how it overlaps with today. So Ransom, let it roll.
Yeah, I had to modernize it, so I rewrote the script because it's a new
script,
it's a new
but it
time.
Came from that. It was originally from that
definitely
59, 60.
All right, here we go. So this isn't going to play over the radio. It's only.
Imagine, if you will, a glimpse into the possible outcome of a million mistakes. What you are about to watch is a nightmare. It is not meant to be prophetic. It need not happen. It's the fervent and urgent prayer of all men of goodwill that it never shall happen. But in this place, in this moment, it does happen. In the midst of it comes unexpectedly over the phone the announcement of the President of the United States, the warning from the very top declaring a state of emergency of suspected enemy missiles approaching. It's anyone's guess where they might land. What city will be obliterated? How many could be lost? And last but not least, will it be me? Will it be my family, friends, my square inch on the map? Minutes go by and nothing. Right as you exhale a breath of relief, an instant wave of horror treks down your spine and a sinking feeling in the pits of your stomach. Just then the power goes out. The only light you see is the glow of your phone. Shining in your face, the icons of terror. Low battery, and even more frightening, the symbol for connection to information and loved ones gone. You try the landline in your office, desperate to contact family. Nothing at all, just a bone-chilling empty silence. Panic-stricken, you blindly forage for your car keys. Success. Something in this nightmare of a day has gone right. Now it's a desperate mad dash for your car. Your mind now in a near intellectual paralysis. Logic a struggle as you cope with a Gatling gun barrage of horrific ideas of what your family might be going through in this very moment. Miraculously, your car starts and you begin your seemingly apocalyptic drive to locate your kin. As you pass the first stop sign, the sight of civic decay is already bearing its nasty head as you speed past fights in the streets, looting, and a complete halt of any semblance of an evolved civilization. To your right, a large fire. As angry, fear-filled citizens with their arms full of grocery items run from what used to be your local food market ran by a mom and pops couple now collapses into a bonfire of dreams. Because of the commotion, your attention span has been stolen. Now before your automobile is a violent crowd. They have now surrounded your car, banging on the metal, bashing at the glass, screaming incoherently. What just a second ago was the road to salvation, now a deadly trap of circumstance and fear blocking your escape. This can't be happening, repeatedly echoing in your head as you start to mumble the phrase in a shrieking, inaudible, childlike tone to yourself. The trepidation now filling your lungs like a poison fog, suffocating and smothering in its certainty. Just then, as your heart and soul seem to be having synergistic perturbations, an alarm blares, overwhelming your senses. Immediately you recall the warning of missiles. You close your eyes and expect the end. But the alarm morphs into a sweet, familiar beckoning of your alarm clock. You open your eyes and switch off the welcoming timepiece. A warm filling of relief as you realize your family is safe in their beds, and no pending doom is written in the stars today. For a split second, you ponder the poor people of your vision, and it reinforces your confidence that you have already prepared for the any scenario. You have peace of mind your children will eat and thrive, because you invested in their future to give some stability if any break in the normality of life happens. You invested in heaven's harvest. The you in this story was a fictional you. But do you get the feeling something unthinkable is going to happen soon? I sure do. The problem is we probably won't see it coming. One morning you'll wake up and the world will be a much different place. Don't panic, prepare. Smart folks are investing in emergency food now. A wise man once said, "It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it." Heaven's Harvest is the nation's leader in emergency food storage. It's the only investment you get 100% of your money for, even better than gold. Survival experts recommend the 3-month emergency food kit. Go to heavensharvest.com, use the code ADAPT at checkout and save a mind-blowing 15%.
And there it was, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, that was mind-blowing, dude. Now, everybody out there, understand that was an AI creation from 5 different things that we were running. Well, actually, Ransom's the runner on this one. He's the expert on putting it together. But the idea is to consolidate, to have at least a backdrop to figure out what we want to do with personalities and voices. So that was it. So anyway, I hope you can see the overlay with what was taken from a 1960s episode and currently what's happening today. I mean, do you see any similarity? Because it seems like the same script is being run 2.0 on us again. Just like the Spanish flu, COVID-19. Just like the 1960s, Cuban Missile Crisis, Russian nuclear scare. Are you telling me after 50 plus years we're back on the Russian nuclear scare thing again? That's insane, man. We're being played like a fiddle.
I was looking at that debt clock while you were talking about it, and I wanted to point out to everybody, this is really trippy. Here, let me put it up there on the screen for everybody. If you look over there at the debt, and then you look at how much tax revenue we're pulling in, right? That's a big, different number. But the more interesting number is down here. U.S. population, 492. I was tripping out of it because if you look under that, it says U.S. income taxpayers. That's only 128 million. So if you think about that now, look up here at the debt thing again. So it says per citizen. This includes everybody that doesn't even work or pay in taxes. According to this clock, they owe $100,000 right now. They just owe it, right? You didn't do anything. You were born, and debt per taxpayer is a whopping $258,000. Just imagine how much that is. So every single citizen that pays income tax, that's 128 million of them, is paying for almost 2 times the amount of people paying in taxes. So 2/3 of the population, and that's just the listed population of legal citizens that are on record. If you bump that up with the 20 million that they kind of admitted to around 2010, and then another 22 million of people that have come in since they've been paying attention during the Biden administration, 22 million more. So that puts that number up about 400 million people, with only about 128 million people paying taxes. Now, if you don't see that that's not a foreseeable if you can't see that that's a system that is made to collapse eventually, I mean, there's no way that we can only pull in $4 billion and owe, or excuse me, is that's trillion? That's $1 trillion, right?
That's trillion, yeah. Add
That's
3 more zeros.
Yeah, I messed up there. That's $4 trillion of tax incoming and 33 trillion in debt. And here, I wanted to ask you about this. So we're looking at those numbers, but obviously that can't sustain for long, because only 1/4 of the population, or 1/3, however you look at it, cannot continually pay for the other 2/3 of people. The other 2/3 of people, these are people that do not pay taxes. A lot of them are on subsidies or socialistic programs that eat away at this number. So you can look over here, at the budget items that they like to show you. And here's $795 billion on just blowing up people. Defense.
Yeah, but you also have to let me also rephrase that there. That Medicare and Medicaid obligation and the Social Security obligation, you add those together, and you're already at $3 trillion. And then we have the debt on the Treasury notes that we have to pay back. So, even with the tax receipts coming in, currently, as you look at this, there's not enough money coming in to even continue to service the debt from those who had bought our Treasury bills. Add another trillion after the war. Yeah, you're up around four something trillion at $4.5 trillion, and we're only bringing in 6. And that rollover point of servicing debt at 1.3 trillion, we're at the point where we can't get. There's not enough money coming in through the GDP and that sort of thing, and the tax receipts to continue to even pay the debt. We just don't have enough money anymore as a country. So this is a very important debt clock you're looking at here. It means our country is completely bankrupt, and it will never resolve the problem and the issue of being able to pay the debt back. That's why our interest rates keep going up for the 10-year Treasury note or the 30-year Treasury. They have to entice people to come and take that risk on getting our debt. Like this never ends. It continues rolling from here. Sorry to cut you off, Ransom.
No, that's actually where I was about to go. I was going to ask you, I don't know if you saw these articles about the Treasury bonds ranking them among the worst market crashes in history, the collapse of Treasury bonds. How does Treasury bonds fit into the overall economic platform there? And then that's not the only kind of bonds, right? There's private bonds and different things like that. But how much? Let's see. I think on that clock, doesn't it show how much debt China owes of ours right here? Yeah. Where is it down here? I thought I saw that. I had
a chart where China has exited 43% of our Treasury bonds as of a few days ago. Because the U.S. Treasury used to be a Tier 1 asset, but after Basel III, they revamped gold as a Tier 1 asset. So they knew something was already going to happen anyway. So, the Treasury bond, the more it costs to do that, to that percentage rate that it costs that they're offering out to the world, that's a negative on somebody else that's holding that within our own country. That's why all these banks are getting stuck out when they have to sell to get liquidity. They got to sell at a 43% loss or a 50% loss. And, once that hits on their books, then they're toast. See, we're in this death loop here where banks and companies can't sell their internally held treasuries because they're going to be selling at a loss. And and now we have to offer, and the more we have to offer outside the United States to entice people to buy, causes more of a loss internally in our own companies. So the more, if it was to go, I think I saw the Treasury today, the 10-year at like 4.8%. But if it goes up to 5 or 6%, that means that the loss internally is going to be probably 60% for companies holding on to that need to liquidate here in America, locally, banks mainly, because they used to hold that on the books as a tier one asset also, but your tier one asset just lost 45% of its value. So, I mean, what's going on with that, man?
Yeah, not to mention the 7 trillion or 8 trillion might as well be a debt held by foreign countries. How does that work out? Yeah, there it is. U.S. debt deficit for China. And we're giving out all this money. All of these other countries that are against the dollar own a bunch of the dollar. So what happens when they all decide to dump it all at once, like across the board? And then, like I said, this is all leading to food problems, because money problems equals food problems. And everybody that's low on money knows that. You get to that point where you're like, oh, do I pay this or do I buy some food for the next couple days? That is the point in which millions and millions of people are already at. So when you push this thing over the limit there, as far as how much a person can deal with the money not being worth anything and not being able to buy anything till their breaking point, we're already seeing that. The homeless rates are going up. People can't afford to buy houses. And you brought up the fact earlier about, like when you go to the store and you take $100, which, I remember when I was single, $100 might even last me a month and a half worth of food. Maybe not so much when I have a family, but it still doesn't buy anything. You can go there and you get like 2 nice meals for 2 or 3 people. You can get for $100. That's 2 days worth of food. People can't just keep doing that. And then on top of that, we leave out the utilities problem, because, if the food goes up, the utilities go up. If the utilities go up, the food goes up. So when you're dealing with this, this is empire collapse. Nobody wants to talk about it, but that's literally what we're looking at, is the Western Empire. There's a lot of different names for it. You could call it the central banking cartel, but they're one step above the empire. Basically, they're out of it. Just like in World War II, they will be fine no matter who comes out on top, and that's the system that they've set up. So no matter what, the house always wins. So they can crash Russia. Say they crashed the Russian economy instead of ours, or the Chinese economy. Imagine what that would do to the entire world, especially even the United States, because we're so tied into what they're doing. We don't make anything. Almost all of our products are coming from China. So what happens when they dump our money? Well, every item that they send us will become extremely expensive. And then people aren't going to want to buy that, of course. They're going to have to resort to other things. And this comes down to the simplistic answers that really there only is, and that is taking back control away from the powers that be in your own life and becoming self-sufficient. Just like somebody that lived hundreds of years ago might live out on a farm and do everything that they need to do right there on the farm, including make the money to pay the taxes on their land if there was, which, there's always taxes. But that's the only thing that it seems like a portion of the population is going to have to do. I don't know what to really think about the massive amounts of people that are just going to disappear when this happens. And I'm talking about for a lot of different reasons: crime, starvation or malnutrition, which leads to sickness. People will be, just the whole idea of everything as far as living conditions in the Western world has been dramatically decreasing. You see over in Europe, the prices the last couple years in the winter for them, buying heating oil and stuff. Now, everybody forgot about that because it's been in the summer months, but that is quickly approaching again. And with all the turmoil in Europe, what do you think is going to happen to all the European energy prices compared to the last couple of years, where they've already hiked it, and then at the same time trying to ban things that are cheaper, that are more, easier to use, and you can become more reliant on it, like those oils and petroleum products that they're trying to eradicate at the same time, which makes no sense that any country in Northern Europe, especially with how cold it can get, would ever agree to doing stuff like that. And one thing I noticed when I lived in England, and I thought this was the most bizarre thing. I got a chance to see, I don't know, probably 10 to 15 houses that people owned. And I got, to come in their home and trip on how different it was. But on every single one of those homes, what I noticed is is they removed the normal hot water heater, and they had one of those little hot water on demand things. But even more bizarre to me is that none of their fireplaces were functioning anymore. They had them bricked off or turned off, or they had it turned into like the place where they put their TV. And I was just thinking, there's going to come a time when somebody's going to knock those bricks out, and they're going to turn all of those fireplaces into use again, because they'll have no choice to stay warm. And speaking of that, with the entire world preparing for it's almost like when people tell you to only believe in God and don't worry about anything, even though, there's different opinions on that. But I don't believe that God would want you to not help yourself. God wants you to help yourself. God will help you by you helping yourself, in my opinion. And the same way is with this thing, that you have to help yourself, because no one else is going to do it. So if you don't start preparing for these things, no one's going to help you. So when the civilization starts to collapse, and we already know what the plan is, they want to shove everybody in cities. They want to make these 15-minute cities. And at the same time, they have these is what I think a lot of people don't talk about, is these agreements amongst nations to eradicate all of the free spaces that you could run to. In other words, in the U.S., we have deals under Clinton, where the UN actually has control of our national monuments. And if you've ever looked at a map of the national monuments and national forest, you'd realize the forest is millions and millions and millions of acres that they're going to try to shut you out of. So at the end of that, what do you think is going to happen when all of these people are being stressed from being squeezed together, not having the appropriate utilities to give them the life quality? And then on top of that, wait till the prescription drugs, because you got to remember that they're a major faction in this, whether or not people live or die. There are so many millions of people that need medications to survive that any number of these scenarios, it's like a get out of jail free card for the politicians. They just go, oh, well, the dollar fell. Oh, the grid's falling apart. Oops, it wasn't our fault. World War III, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to put you on rations and turn off your power because we need the excess. They don't really need it. They've been shutting down everything. So if you think about that, how they're doing Europeans, they're turning off all their alternate ways of surviving, and they're starting those same programs over here. It's Agenda 2030. We're almost there. We're just a few years away from it, and they almost have it in the right place. Now, all they need is a major trigger like we've used in the past, 9/11, et cetera, to trigger a worldwide change that no one can fight. No amount of protesting or complaining. You'll be scared to not be patriotic or behind whatever movement it is. And if you've seen, there is a trend now to declare everyone an insurgent or a terrorist that doesn't agree with their agendas, like the climate agenda. If you're a denier, you're a terrorist. If you don't believe that J6 was worse than Pearl Harbor and 9/11, you're a terrorist. If you support, if you support Donald Trump, which I don't personally support him, but it's like 6 in one half and half a dozen in the other to me, because there are things I can pick apart about every single politician in the arena that shows that they are compromised. And it just depends on which group of compromised people will bend you over more politely in the end. And I was saying that in 2016 when I saw two old men get up on a stage and argue about who's going to force medicate me before the other one does, and who's going to do it better. So we're going to be in these same positions now. I have a feeling that this month there's going to be some kind of dramatic event, just like there always is, almost yearly. You could just, the October surprise. What will it be? Will it be something like a bunch of civilians getting killed in Europe, where they can either blame Russia or people get mad at the Ukrainians? It doesn't really matter what happens. It's just a trigger for them to start doing these programs that they already have set up. And if you haven't noticed, what we predicted about the AI being involved in everything is already blowing up on the scene. Warfare is becoming robotic right before our very lives, for sure. And you sent me over some stuff, so I'll put that up on the screen.
Yeah, because you said squeezed, and I thought, it's the perfect time to put up the U.S. orange juice prices hitting record highs as supplies tumble to 1968 lows. I mean, you said the word squeeze, bro. I'm just following what you're talking about. This is we never discuss what we're going to talk about normally because we're kind of tuned into each other's thoughts and ideas. So, as soon as you said the word squeeze, I'm like, man, I got a slide for a squeeze right here. But anyway, I sent you a bunch of slides, especially the German slide. I think is one of the most important of anything that can, you have to put this into perspective. Germany now imports more electricity than it exports. So prior to, say, 2014, 15, 16, something like before COVID, just a year or so, Germany was a major exporter of electricity. And you notice if you look at the slide, there's dips in between when it did not export so much electricity, but that's the winter. But they were incredibly self-sufficient. Now you got to think about the world in 2015 or 16 compared to today. Almost every factory in Germany is closed. BASF, a factory that hadn't closed in more than 100 years, closed. They even turned off valves and things, which they don't know how to turn back on because they'd never been turned off, ever. Literally, since the beginning of when they turned it on the first time, nobody had ever turned that off. So the pressurization issues were just one thing that they didn't want to deal with. So once it got turned off, a lot of industry and chemical manufacturing just literally stopped on a dime, which will never, ever, ever, never come back. And Germany being a powerhouse, and they said, oh, we got to shut all the nuclear plants down. We got to do it. Okay, you did that. And then they got the war with Ukraine, and the pipeline got blown up, courtesy of America. And the deficit there of German electrical consumption is just astronomical. Germany is becoming a third world nation based just on the electrical availability itself. That's the only thing, and it takes Germany down to a third world nation. By the end of this year, the projections are moving forward, the amount of electricity that Germans will need to stay alive and stay warm. We're not even talking about powering industry any longer. Like the thought of powering industries using electricity is such a foreign concept now across the EU or the European zone. The electricity that's being generated now is just to keep homes warm. Keep your oven moving, because I don't know how dare you burn natural gas, so everything's gone electric. Like you look at Germany, and if you would have told me this 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you and said, that's impossible. Germany's not going to become an impoverished nation because they can't produce enough electricity. Like we are at the point now where Germany itself cannot produce enough electricity, and not just like a little bit. The lion's share of all the electric now in Germany is imported because they can't produce enough of their own internal electricity because all the nuclear plants are closed. The coal-burning power plants, whether you like them or not, with scrubbers or with not, they're closed. Natural gas, closed. They're terrified of water vapor coming out as a byproduct. So this is the literal lunacy of this insane asylum we call Earth here. That they are afraid of a product that you put in that when you burn it, the exporting, when the smoke coming up, it's water vapor. That's why they have those big ass condensers that come up with steam out of it. When you burn methane, i.e. natural gas, your byproduct is water vapor. Now, a country that is afraid of water vapor after they make electricity, in my opinion, just seems a little bit off kilter that they might need a little bit more medication. But that's just me. Like the way they're selling us on these natural gas burning power plants are so terrible for the environment. They're putting up water vapor in the atmosphere. Like, okay, well, Hunga Tonga added 14% more moisture in a single event to Earth's atmosphere. So a couple of natural gas burning power plants is not going to do much for pushing up more atmospheric precipitation. Just not going to do anything. But the downtrend that we're looking at Germany itself, it should be a warning to all of us that when you reduce your electricity, they're going to have one of the lowest GDPs. So it's going negative. One of the powerhouses of the economy of the planet is going into negative GDP because they can't produce any electricity. And then, some of those things, I don't know how many of these slides you put up there on the screen, Ransom, but the food inflation fee that came from Julian Cafe in California. This is Julian, California. They have a regular bill. what you get, this is in June, by the way, the middle of June of this year. They were charged a 5% food inflation fee. Because you know how if you have the gasoline, you have a fuel surcharge tax sometimes when you fly and they can't raise the prices fast enough, where you'll have to pay at the counter. They're like, you got to pay the extra $50 per person, or we can't let you board your flight, and we cannot refund your $3,000 ticket. So you choose, spend the extra $50 or lose $3,000. Up to you, free choice. Fuel surcharge or food inflation fee. And, 5% food inflation fee, okay. For me, that's cheap, because they should have reprinted the menus, because they paid a coder to come in by the hour and actually code that into their registers so it would show you a 5% food inflation fee. I wonder what the hourly rate was for the coder to come in to change all the registers, to push that in so when it prints out on your bill, it adds 5%. Versus the cost it would be to print all the new menus and then laminate them and put them back out on the table with a 5% increase in all food price, without telling you there's a 5%. Because if I got a 5% food inflation fee, I would be like, I am not paying that. Call the police. It was not on your menu, and then you try to bag me with the 5% inflation. I've seen this before in different places, and I just wouldn't have it. At some point, people are going to need to stand up and be like, we're not having this anymore. It's just not. It looks like a real small mom and pop business, and I would feel bad for the employee that's there that has to enforce this. But legally, I really think that's illegal for them. I don't think there's any basis legally for them to put a 5% in food inflation fee on the menu. I mean, I would call any police officer and say, we're going to suss this out in court, write me a ticket, and I want to take this to court and see where it went, because it's getting into la land. And then, one of those other slides I sent you there, this is out of Hawaii, these prices of milk. I was up at Costco today and I was looking at all the different prices. Milk's about the same. It didn't really rise too much. But look at that, Meadow Gold milk. I'm unfamiliar with the brand. I don't know Meadow Gold. $13.49 per gallon in Hawaii for a gallon of milk. Now, I don't know about you or me or others out there, but, that would break my budget. I'd be like, I'm not paying that. Because it irked me enough to pay for extra virgin olive oil. Looking at the $44 for 6 liters, I'm like, not a chance, bro. Not a chance. That was $18 less than a year ago, and you want $44. That's a doubling in price of olive oil in a year. Not paying it. I want to demand destruct that. So, I did end up buying avocado oil instead. So, but Ransom, I'll let you run through the slides, man. Guyana becoming the world's. Now think about I want to put it in perspective. So Germany's collapsing into a third world nation status because of lack of electricity. But Guyana is the world's fastest growing economy currently. Yeah, Guyana, like, Jonestown, kind of northern part of South America, they're coastal. Guyana, that is the world's fastest growing economy. So, I mean, what kind of world are we in now? And I really, appreciate, and I'm not saying anything bad about the country. I know a couple timber suppliers from there. Beautiful people, wonderful culture, great food, exceptional beaches, travel destination that's underserved. And, it's kind of a gem. If you're looking for that unpolished, super cool, like, drop yourself in a time machine traveling, Guyana is where you want to go, because it's going to catch up fast. I'd give it maybe 2 years max before it's on the map of everybody, because it's so close to America. You could fly down there. You can fly to Guyana faster than you can fly to Costa Rica. If you're coming out of the eastern part of the United States, it's closer to go to Guyana than Costa Rica. So put that in perspective. And then this place, tons of money going in there. Huge amount. It's a new BRICS currency aligned nation, and they have a huge amount of gold reserves. And I don't know. I'll stop there, man. But maybe you can, respond to some of those slides that I sent you, or some of the ideas that I'm throwing out here.
Well, for one, I was tripping that wasn't even organic milk. That was just regular homogenized, pasteurized milk there. Can you imagine paying that? No way, man. And then, you would think that there would be some kind of program to lessen the prices for some of the people, at least, especially after Lahaina. But no, they're gonna make everything skyrocket in price. And you imagine the people there that just lost everything, and they're going to the store and looking at, oh, well, we got $700 from Obama. I'll spend it on what you can't even get 5 gallons. What's that? Only 5 gallons of milk for $100. Man, come on. Can you imagine that? I would love to see the butter prices, but this is what they're going to do. This is the plan, is to incrementalize the price up. Until you're happy when they drop it down, which would be back towards the normal range of stuff, but still higher than it was before. That's a game of these retailers have been doing. But what happens when there actually is a lack of supplies for the demand? Well, you see those things skyrocket. The last time that everybody freaked out about the toilet paper, I don't know what it is. I guess we just don't use as much as other people, but we had the normal amount in the house. And we didn't have to go buy toilet paper until after it was over. Like back when there was toilet paper back in the shelves and everybody quit freaking out about it. We didn't even go to the store and get it. We just had a normal amount at home. Some supplies, obviously, you'll be way better. Like I trip out on this idea. The power goes out. You live in Florida. You live in Louisiana. Wherever it happens, a hurricane comes, the power goes out. You don't have nothing. There's no good foods at all rotted in the refrigerator. But if you had a container that was waterproof and you had, I don't know, 100 pounds, 40 pounds, even 20 pounds of beans, 10 pounds of rice and things like that, and just a couple containers, you're good for weeks. You're just good for weeks, just having a little bit of water and some supplies to just sit there and calmly wait for the disaster to go by. But other people can't. They're dying. They're panicking. They have to go to the government to get water. We always see that every time there's a disaster, they're delivering water to everybody. Everybody's dying of thirst. They can't find clean water. They don't have any food. Their house is destroyed or it's underwater. They have no place to go. But I think if I lived in one of those areas, when the hurricane was over, I would have several things set up to immediately start living life again. And I think we have to prepare for that, exactly like if something like that's going to happen, whether or not it's nothing physical. It could be nothing physical at all. The dollar collapses. We go to war. Where you're at, there may be nothing happening other than the prices skyrocketing and people telling you that you may need to ration or you may need to turn your power out because they're trying to ration the power as well. And we've seen that in peace times. Look at California. Look at Texas, trying to push people to ration their energy because of one reason or another. But the truth is, when you look into it, they turned off the power. They made less power or made it less available to the people so that when there came an emergency or an overuse or a need for a lot of it, they just could not supply it or didn't want to. And that looks like about what it is. And like I said, if you're depending on government to come save you, you're in for a big surprise. Look at those people in Lahaina. I know I don't want to keep harping on Hawaii, but that was like the best example ever of why you should be prepared, have a plan for yourself, have your own supplies and your own way out of things. When in doubt, know your way out. And the people that knew their way out and they didn't listen to government and they absolutely did the opposite of what government was telling them to do, they're alive. Unfortunately, a lot of people that listened to the government and were deer in headlights during the emergency and had no plan. They had no idea what to do in case that happened. Like right now, if the same thing happened where I live, I would gather my family. I have a gas mask that I could, go through the smoke and get things if I needed to. We have enough stuff to just leave. Forget about it. Drop the phones, drop the house, forget about it. And we'll be out there being hunter-gatherers within a matter of days while other people are panicking, putting their life back together. But I knew if something that bad happened, I'm out. And I'm not going to let a fire or a government stop me from taking my family to a safe place. And that's how everybody has to think. And you just got to remember, they have these cards. It's almost like that Illuminati card game. And, there's some really spooky stuff with that where it seems like they've already played several of those cards and they just happen to line up with real events. Or you could look at, The Simpsons or whatever floats your boat about predictive programming. The ideas are out there and then they seem to happen. So it's not like they don't happen. So why not be prepared for everything and just treat it just like people used to, where they prepared for any scenario. I use that a lot because that is what people have to deal with. There's no specific or single issue that you should plan, and focus your attention on solely. You have to spread it out. What could happen? And isn't that exactly kind of the financial advice that most investment firms give, is to spread your wealth out? And, or what's the old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Well, I think the same is about planning for ahead. That our government doesn't have you in mind as far as at the top of their list for making sure that you're happy, safe, and whatever. They don't have your best interest in mind when they do certain things. They have their interest, their world agenda interest, their Agenda 2030 that's happened already. Like when do you think Agenda 2030 was? I'm going to say, just give it a 90% completion. I think that was probably in the year 2019, right before they tested out a lot of their new beta programs on the public, in which I have to admit, I was really saddened and upset at human beings' response to those beta programs. I really thought that more people had more fight, more freedom, more independence, more critical thinking, more deductive logic than they did. However, like the saying goes, fool me once, my fault, fool me twice, that's my fault too. Or that's not the saying. I was pulling a George W. Bush right there. Fool me once, it's your fault. Fool me twice, that's my fault. Well, how many times does the government have to fool you before you realize that putting your trust in them is your fault when it doesn't turn out? And that goes for everything, including the dollar. If you have everything tied up in the dollar, well, that's probably not a good thing. Maybe it'll go for another 50 years. Who knows? But what if it collapses in the next 5 years? What are you going to do? Do you have a plan? Thank God that, I've revolved my life around living without cash all the time, or needing cash all the time. There's always things to fall back on. And like I was saying, just having beans and rice stored away, you're already like ahead of the game for most people. So I want to live like my grandparents, but it's hard to believe that they kept all of that in their heads and all of the any scenario possibilities planned for. But we need to live exactly like that.
Yeah, we do, but it seems that the media machine has taught us not to think like that, or even to consider. That's the thing that's so nefarious about the media machine, is they get this complacency built into the everyday wakings of. Because when I lived overseas, everybody in America was doing their thing and they were, terrified of outside of America. But I'm like, wait, everything's fine. What are you talking about? They're like, no, it's so scary. So you're living in, unknown parts of the world. It's just, there's nothing on the map there. Where are you going? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just traveling. Everything was fine. The perception of what it is outside the world is what's unnerving. And they make it seem like it's this completely scary monster out there, but it's actually the scary monster is within. And the complacency built in is to get you to non-action. It's been like that for decades and decades and decades. Why has nothing ever changed in America? Because the media machine gets the people to not do a single thing, say a single thing, write a single thing. So if you're going to write to your politicians, you have to write a physical letter to them before they'll actually legally required to open it. If you send an email or make a phone call, you have to log the call. They don't even have to look at your email, but they legally have to open your letter and then catalog it. And also a letter is worth a certain number of people. I think it's 500 people. If they get a paper written letter, it means that there's that much, one paper written letter equals the equivalent of 500 of people who would think that way but did not write because of one person wrote. So if suddenly they get, 1,000 written letters in their box, they're shaking in their boots, because if they got 1,000 written letters coming in saying the exact same thing, That means 500,000 voters are thinking the exact same way. Then they start to change. Because maybe I told you the story before. During the first bout of COVID, when I was back in the States, and I got back here, I fell apart in Asia, and I was living in Asia, and it completely fell apart over there. And I fly back here to the States, and I get back, and nothing had gone on here. There was no supply chain disruptions. All the medicines were here. Everything was fully functional. Damn, there's even masks in the shops, you know? And I came back like some dude who'd been stuck on an island for years and finally got back to civilization. I'm like, no, you got to get ready. This COVID thing, it's going to wipe us out here. You got to get ready. And people, I tell you, I was laughed at. And people were like, are you kidding me? This is America. This is the best medical system ever in the whole thing. And once it started to sweep, and it swept here fast, you know, once it started to get really deep. And remember all those people running for the toilet paper? I swear to you, I was the only guy in the line, no toilet paper in my cart, 100% food. And people were looking at me like I was an idiot. Why is this guy buying all this food and no toilet paper? Who's this joker, this idiot not buying all the toilet paper? There were people with carts and carts and carts and carts all over the place, just stacked to the rafters with toilet paper. And I'm the only guy with a complete cart full of food. Like that thing weighed 200 pounds, me pushing that thing. Just like you say, rice and beans and all this stuff. Because the reason I'll tell you this, like a 25-pound bag of flour, you know, how many, you could get more than 100 loaves out of that, I think. If you're using a third of a cup or a half a cup, something like this, 2 cups, maybe not 100 loaves. But you could easily get 50 loaves out of a 25-pound bag of flour. You know, and I buy sugar, too, by the bulk. 25 pounds bags of sugar, 25-pound bags of flour. But I do bake my own breads, so I do use it. And I'm always experimenting with different protein contents in the flours to try to see which one works, which one doesn't. I've really never had very good luck with like 14% protein, like really dense. I always find with just like regular all-purpose baker's bread, I know it's probably not the best. There's glyphosate and stuff in it. But to swing way over in the real heavy, dense stuff, it always comes out too thick. It's just, maybe I don't have the correct oven to cook it. But I find that just a regular all-purpose baking flour works great, and you get fluffy loaves and things. But to have that knowledge of, all right, I can take a 25-pound bag of flour with some oil and with some yeast, and I have yeast to be able to prepare different things, and then come out, and people would be like, I don't have any bread. We haven't eaten bread in months, you know, whatever. Dude, do you have any flour laying around? Let's make some in your oven. Because I noticed today myself also when I was shopping, like about halfway through my venture before I got to the frozen food section, I looked at it and go, damn, it's like I was back to an 1860s store. Everything was super basic. I had the salt, I had the flour, I had the sugar, you know, just like bone broth and chicken broth and stuff. And my cart was like an 1860s, like old home, you know, some kind of sundry shop somewhere. And I had bacon fat in there, pork belly and stuff. And I looked at it and I go, damn, this is old school shopping, man. I feel like I'm in the 1800s. And I really didn't pay attention if people were looking at my cart like, what's this guy? He's got all just like, going to make his own stuff. This guy's a little interesting. But what I did notice by my perspective was I didn't really notice so many people looking at my cart of kind of just my basics of create my own stuff out of nothing, like home goods type of thing. But what I noticed was the huge amount of junk food in all these other people's carts. And I was thinking, man, you know, people are going to have to change the mind frame. And I get it. I love snacks too. I love snacks sometimes. You need that little treat. You just need, you know, I worked, I'm hungry, I'm working, I'm doing something. I need a little treat, a little something cookie or a cracker or something, a cheese cracker. I get it. But when 90% of a cart's full of just complete junk food, like the mind frame needs to change a little bit on A, what you can create from scratch, but B, just the buying habits of nutritious foods are going to need to go and be completely revamped. But again, that's not something they're talking about or teaching in the media. Like, just go out, everything's going to be fine tomorrow. And I've had a few people on the Adapt 2030 channel write and go, well, nothing's happened since you were making all these predictions. And I'm like, I don't know if you're just trolling, bro, or if you haven't been awake for the last year or two. But if you think the world was exactly the same and nothing's changed 2 years ago to compare to today, I don't know, man. Maybe there are people in the world that aren't seeing the change, but I don't know where they're living that they could not see this big of a change occurred across the entire planet. Just, but just the reason I was trying to make all these statements was think about making things from scratch, like Ransom was talking, the beans and the rice, to create your own foodstuffs. I mean, I got a couple different kinds of beans because I love garbanzo beans. So I'll buy the dried ones because you just need to soak those in water for if you get up in the morning and put them in the water, by the time you're ready for dinner in the evening, they're super soft and supple. You can do a million things with them. Same thing with the beans. Any kind of beans you get, throw them in the water in the morning. 12 hours later, they're soft enough to cook without giving you the gas. Lentil beans, kidney beans, whatever. There's a million kind of beans, and there's a fair few different types of rice too. Although India quit exporting a lot of the non-basmati rice stuff, but anyway. I mean, if you went back to your grandparents' time and looked at what they had in their kitchen, they made an enormous amount of stuff from scratch. Even the potato chips. My grandma used to make potato chips for us. She had this thing that would slice them. You had to do it by hand, but it would slice them like paper thin. And then she would put them in the oil and then put them on a paper towel. And we'd have our homemade potato chips. I mean, there's a million things you can do homemade, but I don't know, man. I think, Ransom, the homemade, made from scratch mentality is going out with this instant lifestyle that we're used to. But, as soon as China cuts off the goods and that starts breaking down, I don't know where a lot of people are going to be in the psyche when this happens. Nutritional health for the body is one thing, but the mind is a completely different animal that's going to get away from a lot of people that just aren't going to be able to handle it or even have the knowledge or cookbooks around. Or, what if your internet gets cut off and you don't have any cookbooks? I mean, how are you going to make anything if you don't have a bread baking recipe book? Those are like the basics people need to have. Like one pot stew, recipes, different kind of cook. You're going to have a few things for, different variables there. So, start buying some books on just basic cooking stuff. And breads would be, if you're going to buy one single book, I would obviously point you toward a bread baking book. Because that is going to be something you could trade, you can bake, you can save yourself money. And Ransom, I know you can make a lot of your own food. So, I mean, do you agree with some of those statements or do you think I'm off base on that?
No, man, we actually just pulled out this book from, it's got to be the early 60s or maybe 50s. That's it has 100 recipes in there for ground meat, from hamburger to whatever. But it's just amazing that we were looking through there and we're all of these meals that look delicious that, I forgot even existed because, I hadn't eaten them since I was a kid. So I forgot all about them. But just looking through that book, there's so many ways to prepare the same food where you don't get tired of it. It's amazing. And besides that, that's the best food there is. Everybody knows that, especially where we live. You can go out and eat at some really good restaurants. They have Mexican-American restaurants. They have New Mexican restaurants. They have Mexican restaurants. But the best food that you're going to eat comes from somebody's abuela or a tia or something, that's making it. And we're getting it off Facebook, pozole, tamales. And guess what they're doing? They're buying bulk. They're making a bunch of food ahead of time. They're also selling it. But I guarantee you, each one of those houses, some of them are very low income. But I guarantee you one thing, when you go in there, Grandma's got a bunch of food cooking. There's food cooking every day. They have stores of things like beans and rice and dried foods, dried chilies, dried herbs, dried spices, everything packed in there. And that's the way everybody should be living. And it's kind of amazing that the mainstream American people have switched over to the fast food. And matter of fact, now I watched this video the other day where a guy was walking around downtown in Paris. And he was completely confused because since he was a kid, they had told him, you need to go there when you get older. You'll miss out if you don't travel abroad and go to places like Paris. And then he gets there. There's people pooping in the sidewalks. It smells like pee. There's graffiti everywhere. There's cafes everywhere. And compared to the food, our food, which you would think that this is French food, you would think that people would love it. But instead they're thinking, oh, it's bland. I had to go to Church's Chicken, and then they were showing around the whole area. There's Popeyes, there's McDonald's, there's Burger King, there's Domino's, there's Kentucky Fried Chicken, there's Taco Bell, there's all of that same stuff spreading through Europe, destroying, helping to destroy. Now, when all of these newer generations are used to just going to buy something to eat, which they are now, and then even on top of that, the delivery foods, like everybody uses their phone to get their food. What are they going to do when it turns off? Most of these people don't know how to cook. They don't know even what to buy. They don't know what foods go together. They know nothing about spices or flavor or, nutrition. The other day I was out here looking at my purple amaranth, and, I knew that gathering the seeds up, you can make sprouts. And then I was thinking, well, the leaves are edible. What can I make with them now that the year's almost over and they're kind of, leathery and stuff. But I got into it, and then I find out they're high in protein. You can do all kinds of stuff with them. There's food everywhere sitting outside.
Yeah, by the way, okra, the leaves and the flowers, those are edible also. Thanks for joining us tonight. Hope you got something out of our conversation. David DuByne and Ransom Godwin signing off. Please remember to sign up for the show notes. The Ice Age Conversations, oilseedcrops.org. You see it in the nav bar. We'll send you the show notes of what we talked about tonight.